And so today is a day of reckoning, a day of reckoning within the Asian American community to recognize our complicity in upholding the institutions of white supremacy.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Today, we have to interrogate our own anti-blackness that exists in our community. That we have to recognize our own privilege and anti-blackness that has existed for decades. That we have to understand that any progress that we have towards defeating Asian hate is inextricably tied to the progress of our black and brown brothers and sisters.
Did you ever notice how the model minority myth is only ever weaponized in one direction to harm black people? When black people are being compared to Asian Americans, then the hard work ethic and the emphasis on education are values that Asian Americans possess that black people need to aspire to. But when white people are compared to Asian Americans, suddenly those same values are described as toxic. Black parents are told that they need to put more emphasis on education and discipline the way Asian American parents do, but with respect to white parents, suddenly Asian Americans are abusive, authoritarian tiger parents. And black students are told that they need to study harder the way Asian American students do, but with respect to white students, suddenly it's unfair that they have to compete with the overachieving, nerdy Asian American students who lack social skills and were raised by the abusive, authoritarian tiger parents. And this is because the model minority myth is not something that was invented by Europeans about Asians. It is something that was invented in the United States about Asian Americans so that the United States could rehabilitate its reputation after the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II and to justify continued discrimination against black people. Because according to the model minority myth, what black people do is never enough, and what Asian Americans do is too much, because we live by a standard of just white. Since you ask, black people in the United States on average were more successful than Asian Americans up until the 1950s and 60s when the United States started pushing the model minority myth. If you look at census data from the 1940s, black people were earning significantly more than Asian people. But the United States was engaging in military actions in Asia under the guise of bringing democracy and fighting against communism when the rest of the world started to wonder, with the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, the Chinese Exclusion Act, and Jim Crow, what business did the United States have being in another continent telling other countries how to operate when they treat their own people so poorly? That's when the United States started to say, no, Asians are doing great. They work hard, they're quiet, they don't protest, and they are lifting themselves up by their bootstraps out of poverty. The problem is black people who are protesting. And opportunities that were previously withheld from both black and Asian people started being provided to Asian people and continued to be withheld from black people. Then in 1964, when the Civil Rights Amendment finally passed and black people were supposed to receive equitable access to those opportunities, in 1965, the United States opened the door to Asian immigration with the Hart-Celler Act and continued giving those opportunities to Asian people. Very importantly, the ability and resources to open, own, and operate businesses in black neighborhoods, which effectively deprived black people of the ability to invest in their own neighborhoods. Now, in case you're still thinking, no, it really is about emphasis on education, by the 1980s, an Asian American without a high school diploma was earning about the same as a white person without a high school diploma, and both were earning significantly more than a black person without a high school diploma. So that has nothing to do with educational attainment and everything to do with the opportunities provided. But also that you inserted yourself in a conversation between two Asian Americans to weaponize Asian American identity against black people is just gross.
Golden Boy, and we want to talk about the model minority myth and why this debate never goes away. Have you ever noticed that whenever race, education, or economic success is discussed in America, the Asian community is often brought up as an example? Some people point to high graduation rates, strong family structures, and academic achievement as evidence that success comes down to culture and personal responsibility. So, others argue that this perspective oversimplifies reality and ignores the struggle many Asian communities face. So, today we are talking about the modern minority myth, where it came from, why it remains controversial, and why it continues to shape conversation about race in America. Now, before I even continue about this, I want to give you a term. What is modern minority myth? Like, the term modern minority myth became popular during the 1990s and 1960s, and a period where when America was experiencing majority social and political change. Like, certain media outlets highlighted the success of some Asian American communities, portraying them as a proof that hard work and education could overcome discrimination. And on the surface, this seemed positive. After all, who wouldn't want to be associated with success? So this is what we want to talk about in this video. Let's discuss it, and the people are going to talk about it, and I will come back and I'll give you much about this.
That minority myth and proximity to whiteness be whooping y'all asses. Because didn't I teach you guys better? Proximity to whiteness is a what class? A privilege. And a privilege is what? Not a right. It is something that could be taken away. What I wish I could tell immigrants who migrate to this country, whether you're from Asia, the Caribbean, Africa, Latin America, doesn't matter what part of the world you come from, whatever caste system, social hierarchy applies in your native country does not fly here. America has its own history. It's an ugly history. And it has its own social hierarchy that is upheld by white supremacy. And if you really think putting on that funky ass red hat and putting them ugly ass bumper stickers on your car is gonna save you from that social hierarchy, this is your wake-up call. Like I said in my last video, just because you may be considered white, have great proximity to whiteness in your respective native countries, does not mean you have white privilege in this country. It's better you hear it from me than find out on your own the hard way. When you become tokenized and you are the model minority and you're pedestalized, right? And you're looking down on everybody else and you're willing to throw everybody else under the bridge, under the bus, whatever. Never, ever, ever forget who granted you that privilege, because they will remind you. And by the way, just because you were invited to the club does not make you a member of that club. And do you know why she condemns the immigration crackdown? I hate to say it, y'all were bamboozled, you were scammed, you were duped. They sold you this idea that they were only going to go after the illegals, that they were only going to go after the criminals, right? That's what they were saying. Oh, we're not going to really target the hardworking, ones who just quiet, don't commit crimes. We're going to target the bad ones. They scammed you and used your vote in the process, because never ever forget the Republicans can't win elections without minority votes. You thought you were throwing other people under the bus. And y'all are getting this wake-up call that when ICE is patrolling the streets and they're doing their raids and they're masked up and they're freaking everybody out, they're not going to be able to differentiate you between me, between her, between him. ICE, how many stories do we have to see about ICE detaining U.S. citizens, U.S.-born citizens, naturalized citizens? How many times do we have to hear about their fuck-ups, sending U.S. citizens to detention camps with no lawyers, no right to a lawyer, no representation? These people are just grabbed up on the street by unmasked, unclothed people. No due process. You thought because of your proximity to whiteness, because of your privilege, because you were tokenized, because they sold you this fucking fairy tale that you're different, you're the model minority, you did things the right way, you came here legally, you got your papers the right way, you thought you were above everybody, you thought you were better than everyone, until an organization like ICE is not going to care or really tell the difference between somebody who voted for Trump and somebody who's illegal. Because they asking for everybody's papers. I don't know if you noticed. and then have the nerve to act surprised. We told you this was gonna happen. We literally told you what was gonna happen. And when you give people in power the power to take away due process for one, that threatens due process for all. And I'm here to remind you, whatever privileges you may think you have or possess can be taken away by the very person who granted you that privilege. Let this be a reminder. He who puts you on a pedestal can very easily knock you the fuck off that pedestal. And have a good night.
I think the vast majority of Asian Americans want to fight the model minority stereotype, but a lot of this rebellion becomes misguided. Let me cook. This stereotype posits that we're all quiet, studious, nerdy, and that white supremacy can punch down on us and we won't fight back. So say you're a young Asian guy. You've been hearing that you're smaller, weaker, less of a man, that Asian women won't date you. No woman will date you. So what do? You become misogynist. You go online, you start calling Asian women Oxford studies. You dox them, you threaten their safety. And in fact, you become so eager to prove your masculinity and your capacity for violence that you become Andy Chow. You start racially profiling, harassing, and harming Black people. Now, of course, not every Asian guy is doing this. I'm just illustrating what an easy pipeline it is to fall down. And whether I'm talking about the fetishization of Asian women or this recent Rick Chow murder case, the angry Asian guys in my comments are saying the exact same shit. Now, if you're an Asian girl, the stereotype says that you go to Kumon, you've got glasses, you're nerdy, maybe you play an instrument, you listen to your parents. So maybe you start dressing a little bit edgy. Maybe you start dressing so, quote, edgy, end quote, that you end up appropriating Black culture. Yeah, do you see what I'm saying here? Have you not seen these girls? And what does white supremacy do? Appropriate Black culture, so now you're helping them. Or maybe your aesthetic doesn't go that far, but in order to combat your quiet Asian girl stereotype, you don't go for a quiet, studious, emasculated Asian guy. You go for a white guy. One that's a little tough. Maybe he's a little bit racist, but like he jokes about it. Maybe he fetishizes you, but again, he makes it funny or cute or just denies it in a way where there's plausible deniability. Congratulations, you have played into the hand of white supremacy once again. Again, not every Asian woman is doing this, but it is a pipeline. Very easy to fall into. If you really want to rebel against the model minority stereotype, educate yourself about how this happens, about the history and the cultural factors that all come together and encourage our community to do shit like this. Stop believing what they tell you about yourself, what they tell you about other genders of Asian people, what they tell you about other minorities. Consume media that is not just made by white people or Asians pandering to white people. Go watch a Ryan Coogler movie. Go watch media from Asia in which Asians are portraying themselves without thinking about the white gaze as much. Be in community with not just other Asians, but people of every skin tone and listen to their perspectives. That is actually what is going to make the powers that be uncomfortable. And if you're getting pushback from conservative Asians and conservative white people, then you're doing the right thing.
For some reason, a lot of people don't want to recognize that anti-Indian racism is still racism. Racism against Asian people is equally bad, even though they have a stereotypically higher financial status than other minority groups. It is still a bad thing. I have gotten dozens and dozens of comments about how a lot of Asian communities are being targeted and have been targeted throughout centuries, from Japanese internment camps in California all the way up until the 2020 attacks on Asian people with the COVID pandemic. Asian people are not immune to violence or vicious attacks related to their race, specifically Indian people. There is not a day that goes by when an Indian person is brought up in white social circles when something negative is not said about them. Most of the time, as soon as that person's name is even mentioned and it comes out that they're an Indian person, white people will immediately respond with some sort of racial stereotype about how Indian people smell, the way they act, or things being crowded and crazy. And it's really fucking disgusting. And racism is equally bad whether we're talking about Black people, whether we're talking about brown people, or more specifically, whether we're talking about Asian communities, South Asian, East Asian, it doesn't matter. Regardless of who you are, please watch the things that you're saying and stop fucking being racist. It's really not that hard to be a considerate person.
To preface, I have no problem with Black people boycotting Asian businesses in their communities and putting their Black dollar into their own communities. I support that. I want to address a lot of the upper, middle, Ivy League educated East Asians that are getting on this app and proving once again that you are centering your own experience when you were addressing the situation, because ultimately anyone who has ever grown up as an Asian person in predominantly poor Black or white community, you know there's a bit of nuance to the situation. And what I'm seeing is I'm seeing a lot of Asians from Cupertino, the Bay Area, Bellevue, Orange County get on this app and recycle the same 3 talking points about addressing anti-blackness in the Asian community, we need to progress that conversation. And ultimately, I just think that the reason why it's not progressing is because it's not reaching the actual people that you're intending to reach. When you say that you want to help the black community, or you want to address anti-blackness, or you want to speak to your own community, I'm assuming you're trying to speak to the people who own these stores, the parents, the kids, the family members. I'm assuming that you want to reach them. But when you make your think piece on TikTok to explain redlining because you read it from a book, that's your privilege. You get to read from a book. And some of us actually grew up in those poor black and white communities and understand the situation better. But you recycle those think pieces, and ultimately you're not going to reach the demographic that you claim you want to reach. Now, don't get me wrong. I think there's value to that. I think there's value to educate people on that. But I also think that you need to understand that when you're talking about this type of lived experience of people who are complex human beings, the easy way out is to say, oh yeah, all Asian people are anti-black. They're all racist. They want to exploit black dollars so that they can position themselves to be white and escape poverty. And it's very easy to make statements saying, well, it didn't matter that Cyrus had a gun. It's also very easy to say, oh, well, Cyrus shouldn't have had a gun. That's his fault. He brought this upon himself. I don't support any of those claims. Poor communities are ridden with crime and fear. If you ever grew up in a poor community, you know those are the two ingredients that cause a lot of the problems that we have in our communities. There's a lot of fear and there's a lot of crime. And it's, for the most part, it's indiscriminate crime. You know, the older ladies, they used to come into my mom's nail salon. They'd be like, I'm gonna give my mom a fake name. They'd be like, Deborah, they got me. They stole my car. They robbed me on my way to work. They took my money. They broke into my home. They would talk about these things, and my mom would be like, hey, let me give you a discount on the nails. Let me give you a free nail, whatever. And the reverse would happen. A lot of you have never been held by gunpoint. A lot of you have never seen a kid hold a knife at your mom and say, I'm going to slice your mom open unless you give me $100. It's very easy for you to make your think pieces to blame an entire race of people and say, yeah, we're all like anti-black, we're all racist. I see these creators over and over, they're fighting with other Asian people. They're saying, I don't care about your experience. I don't care if you were living in this community. I don't care about you. Because ultimately, whatever think piece they put out, it doesn't affect them. They live in Bellevue. They live in Cupertino. They got a white husband or a white boyfriend that drive a Tesla. It doesn't matter what they say online because that doesn't affect them. I'm heartbroken that we live in a society where there's parts of the country where a teenager thinks that they need a gun. But I don't need to ask the question, why does he have a gun? Because I know. I grew up with those kids who thought they needed street creds, thought they needed actual protection from other teenagers, thought that they had no other options in life. When you're poor, your options are bleak. People will say, oh, I blame the parents. I used to work with group homes and at-risk teens in San Jose. I used to have that mindset too. I would blame the parents. I'd be like, did you not raise your kid better? This mom pulls me aside and she says, Paul, do you know why my son is in a group home? And I said, no, I never asked. She said, I got 2 other kids at home, and he would not stop bringing guns into the house. He joined a gang. He went down the wrong path, even though we didn't do that. And so I thought to myself, wow, I'm hearing this mom explain to me, I had to make a decision to protect my other kids. It's not so easy when you break down all these different variables that influence people to commit crime. A babysitter. She wasn't really a babysitter. She was an older black lady, and she saw my parents struggling. She's like, oh, it's just you two. It's just you two raising your kids. Let me help you out. She would raise us sometimes. She would take us out and watch us. But she had so many rules. She said, don't pick up a gun. Don't do drugs. Don't watch The Simpsons because it shows bad behaviors. Don't do all this shit. And you know, she would always be like over and over. And she said, you know why I'm telling you this? Because I wish my grandkids had listened to me. I want you guys to focus on your education. I want you to get the fuck out of this city. This is not a defense of Rick Chow. I'm looking at the violent history, and I asked myself, you know, I had the same conversation with my parents after the 9th, 10th time of them being robbed. I said, Mom, is it worth it? Kids are pointing guns at you. They're pointing knives at you. They're throwing rocks at your window. They're spray painting chink on the sidewalk. Is it worth it? Why don't we just leave? She said, this is my community. I have friends here. These are the people I've grown to be in community with. What ended up happening was that she just said, don't come to the nail salon anymore. We wouldn't go anymore. You know, as kids we used to, but after people started bringing weapons inside the nail salon, she said, no, I don't want to risk my kids' lives for my business, and that's what happened. But I had those same conversations, and those conversations that Rick Chow and her family should have had. Is it really worth it? Why are you killing people over water bottles? That's terrible. You strip a kid of their life, of their chance to change, of their chance to do better. I don't know much about the lawsuit. I don't know if he pointed a gun at him. I know they had found a gun, but that's really not the important part for me. These are the important conversations that you need to have with your parents, but also have with your kids. But I also have empathy. I understand them both. I understand it is difficult. But at the end of the day, Asian people with their businesses, we have a lot of power. Because over the years, as money, the black dollar is being put into our businesses, we get to leave. When my brother and I got accepted into Stanford on a full ride because my parents didn't have money, we did the college application. My parents were making $30K for the two of them. But they told the community, and the community was so happy. And, you know, Big Mama came in, she said, I'm proud of you. Leave. Don't come back. Get a good job. Don't grow up here. It's very easy to make your think pieces. It's very easy to condemn an entire race. It's very easy to blame the parents. Growing up poor is a very complicated experience. And ultimately, when we say the system has failed us, I feel that. Because I think that there were so many kids who could have had the same opportunities, could have had such a good life if the government had actually gave a damn. 3 years ago, when we were posting videos about Cyrus, people asked the same questions. How do we get more black-owned businesses in these communities and start building wealth? That was the question people asked 3 years ago, and that's the question people are still asking again this time. Because it's complicated. You know, if you're in those communities, you know how they gatekeep the supply chain. You know, a lot of Asians work with other Asians for the beauty supply stores, the nail salons. I don't know anything about the liquor stores, but it's a complicated thing. It's not just so easy to be like, oh yeah, open a business. It doesn't work like that. There's a history to it, you know? Like, getting a loan is very difficult. It's difficult to raise that much money. It's difficult to offer the same competitive pricing that a lot of Asian businesses do offer. There's a lot of people who get online saying, I'm not boycotting anything because these are my resources. When you live in a poor community, you don't have that many resources. And so when an Asian person is able to offer you a $5 meal, you take that. It's difficult. It's not the same as your lived experience. And I know a lot of these Asian creators, they don't mean any harm. I know that you guys don't mean any harm when you say these think pieces, but I just think that you don't understand how much more complex it is to be poor. All the money that I made from the videos on Cyrus and this one, I'm donating to the GoFundMe, and I hope that all the other Asian creators who make their think pieces, I hope that you guys ask them to donate their money too, because I don't believe in weaponizing tragedy to make money.
Critics argue that the story wasn't that simple because they were trying to give out on success and education that could make you to be less discriminated, yes? And one of the biggest criticism of the modern minority label is that it lumps together millions of people from vastly different backgrounds. Like, the Asian community includes people with roots in East Asian and Southeast Asian and South Asians and the Pacific Islands. Like, their history, cultures, immigration experience, and economic outcomes vary dramatically. Now, when people hear Asian success, they often think of highly educated professionals, and what they don't always see is are refugee communities and communities like they are working class, they are families, there's language barriers, and neighborhood are facing many of the same challenges as other struggle communities. You find also another issue is the pressure created by the stereotype itself. Like, you find that many Asian students report feeling enormous expectations to succeed academically because society often assumes they are naturally gifted or destined for success. Failure can be even more devastating in Asian communities. You find also that there is mental advocates, like mental health advocates, have pointed out that these pressures are often overlooked because the public assume Asians don't face significant challenges. At the same time, many Asians push back against the attempts to completely dismiss the factor that contributed to their success. They argue that immigrants families often made extraordinary success. Like you find that the Africans who usually make it in America. And we don't need to talk about this because they are arguing that immigrant families they sacrifice. They do extraordinary sacrifice. Like they emphasized on education and encouraged long-term thinking. Now, from this perspective, recognizing those values should not automatically be considered offensive. And this is where the debate becomes more complicated. Can cultural values contribute to success? And many people will say yes. Can success be explained entirely by culture? And many experts also will say no. So the truth is that success is usually influenced by a combination of factors like family support, education, economic opportunities, community networks, and public policies. And let's say the individual effort, right? So focusing on only one factor really tells the whole story. Perhaps the most controversial aspect of the modern model minority myth is how it is being used in discussion involving other racial groups. So you as a person, you also have to know that there are critics that also argue that stereotypes sometimes being used to suggest that if one minority group can succeed, then systematic barriers must not be significant issue. And other respondents that highlighting successful community should not be considered as divisive, regardless of where you stand. One thing is very clear, like broad stereotypes rarely capture the full picture. So some Asians are thriving, some are struggling, some benefit from the stereotypes, and others feel harmed by it. Like every community, their experiences are diverse and are complex. And maybe the real lesson here is that no group should be reduced to a single narrative, like whether that narrative is positive or negative. So, what do you think? Is the modern minority label a recognition of achievements, like a harmful stereotype, or a little bit of both? So let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I will gladly appreciate what you will be giving out about this modern minority myth.